Hey guys, welcome back to the Bucket Think Tank. So, what I want to talk about today, amongst all the projects I probably should be doing, is actually something I've had on my mind for a while. Something I've wanted to talk about, which are comics I regret reading. So, what is a comic one actually regrets reading? Well, it's sort of like anything you regret doing. It's not something that's inherently bad, which I think is where we think of something like you regret doing. Usually, we regret doing bad things or these things that didn't turn out so well. To me, when it comes to consuming media, something you regret is totally different than something that's bad because there are total things that are bad, like bad television, bad books, that are just glorious dumpster fires. It's great to watch it. It's great to watch it burn. It's just a fun time to be had. It's something you can joke about it. You can joke about it. Fun Star Wars prequels. People hate those, but we've gotten some of the best memes out of Star Wars prequels. We just have. We just have. Good movies don't usually give you good memes. All right, bad movies give you great memes. All right, forgettable movies don't give you memes. Forgettable comics don't give you memes. The same basic thing. And those are things I regret reading. Stuff that either just falls flat. In other words, it's nothing of any real interest to it. Like it may have had a great idea, but it just goes nowhere with it. And the idea is like decent at best. And then there's also just books that feel like they exist to do something else. And that's what this list is going to be. So, book one is Convergence. So Convergence was one of DC's attempts to explain, or at least attempt to explain, well, not really explain, what's going on with continuity. Didn't really explain that at all. So ultimately, what it turns out is Brainiac, Ultimate Brainiac, has taken different continuities, different books, Elseworld titles and whatnot. There's Kingdom Come, Superman. There's Long Halloween Batman. There's the JSA. There's the Outsiders. See, it's just sort of everywhere. It's not just different continuities. That's stuff that just hasn't happened in New 52 yet. And what Brainiac has done is, guys. Okay, so you're all in these dome cities I've made. But you know what? I'm kind of bored now. You're all here. So what's going to happen is I want you all to fight. And whoever wins at the end of the day, I will give them their own Earth, their own planet. So, okay, sounds fun, sounds worthwhile. It isn't. It's a book that is pretty much only interesting on its tie-ins, but like the Lois and Clark um, book that came out of that was actually really great. And where did it fall apart? Well, who are we supposed to root for with this? You really shouldn't root for anyone because you love these stories. You might root for your least favorite one to lose, but that's it. This is an Earth 2 story. This is ultimately what Convergence is. And this is sort of where it starts to fall apart. Because if you weren't reading Earth 2, you would not care about these characters. And Earth 2 is, well, New 52's attempt to tell a different Earth story. And Earth 2 was actually, I think, a really solid book. Had some hiccups. It really dragged itself on too long for us all to lose the dark side. And it's actually I think, one of my possible favorite comics. I plan to reread that entire thing at some point for a different project. But because it was about Earth 2, why would you care? Like at all. And then apparently they're all let go out into the world, which doesn't quite make sense because later on in stories like Rebirth and Dark Knight's Metal, the continuity is just sort of muddled a bit. And then, like, Convergence didn't lead to Metal or Rebirth. No, it led to the DCU initiative, which is weird because Convergence has nothing to do with the DCU initiative. It really doesn't. It's just, well, there's a couple of changes coming to DC. Maybe we should like do some other stories too. What do you mean like changes? Well, Superman's been outed by Lois Lane and Commissioner Gordon's Batman. Okay, so let's put out some new books. And some good stories came from that. But that had nothing to do with Convergence as a whole. Convergence, legitimately, from what I've heard, was just a story that was put out while they moved their offices to California. So, yeah, it legitimately was a story that felt like someone just suggested the Earth 2 team to win. And even then, sort of nothing came from it. Next, Darth Vader. So this is not any specific Darth Vader comic. I think I've read just about every Darth Vader comic that's come out since Star Wars was um, bought by Disney. Excuse me. And the problem I have with Darth Vader comics is that you know where it's gonna go. You do. Like nothing that happens in any Darth Vader comic is going to change what happens to Darth Vader at the end. Spoiler alert: he dies in Return of the Jedi. Or did he? No, he's dead. He's dead. He's dead. Force Ghost will probably show up later. Whatever. Don't really care. The problem is like I said, nothing important is going to happen that will really change anything. The Darth Vader comic is being used to effectively help world build the Star Wars universe under the new continuity, which just sort of fell pointless because Vader always sells. People love Darth Vader. People love the the young boy that grew up to be a fascist. They just do. And I just like the whole time I'm reading, and whenever I read Darth Vader comic, okay, so I'm not reading it for Vader's character. I'm reading it to see what the world's going to do, and I think Vader's interesting. What was it? Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader. That book, which I think is still in continuity, is a really great example of exactly what should be done with Vader's character, and I don't see it in any of the Vader comics. Actually, Star Wars as a whole, their comics seem to be sort of falling apart because we're just now getting a Knights of Ren book. So this is a book that would explain Kylo Ren, or at the very least, Kylo Ben Solo after the events at Luke's Jedi Academy. And why are we just now getting this? Like, why is Disney or Marvel spending so much time telling us about stuff that happens before Empire Strikes Back? We're just now getting to almost post Empire Strikes Back with these comics, and these came out in what, 2015? Yeah, I think 2015. So we're like going on 4 years, and nothing of any real substance has come out. There's been a Captain Phasma book. Phasma let the world down. No one really. Poe Dameron, like, who cares? Who cares? Holdo, who cares? Rose Tico, Rose, no, no. Ray hasn't gotten anything. Um, Phasma has Hux had something. Hux had a book, I think. The First Order had a book, and I'm like, why is any of this happening? Like, no one really cares. What people would like to see is something post Return of the Jedi. Star Wars Shattered Empire, written by Greg Rucka, takes place like 10-15 minutes after Return of the Jedi, and it's a really great story. It even ties in to Poe's parents, and that's a great story. I love that story with Luke and Poe's mom. Loved it. So why are we telling a story about what happened after Shattered Empire and before The Force Awakens? Why aren't we doing that? I know there are novels coming out, but why aren't there comics? All right, it's just a total waste of time, and that's why I don't like the Darth Vader. That's why I regret reading Darth Vader comics. George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. So I like Game of Thrones. I've sort of been making a video on that on the show for a while, and I'm currently reading Fire and Blood, which is the history of the Targaryen family, and I have a copy of The World of Ice and Fire, that big coffee table book. So I thought, well, let's read the comics because I just finished reading at the time the Hedge Knight comic, which is an adaptation of the Duncan Egg stories that George wrote. And I'm like, okay, well, let's read this. The problem with A Song of Ice and Fire comic book is if you've read the book, there's nothing for you. There's nothing it really has to offer you except maybe Nude Catelyn, which Nude Catelyn's hot. Let's just call it what it is. And yeah, it's interesting if you had trouble putting the image to your brain when you're reading. Maybe, um, maybe if you're just that big a fan, you'll enjoy it. Like I don't see why I couldn't have read The Hedge Knight as a novel and not as a comic. And the problem is, after watching Game of Thrones, I've mentally put in those characters into the book. So Tyrion does not look as ugly as he does in the books because Tyrion's kind of ugly in the books, but he's Peter Dinklage when I read it, so it's fine. And yeah, it goes from there. Like Brienne's a bit hotter in the books now because I've got that mental image. And Pod the Rod, yeah, he's still 12 in the book, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, it doesn't really offer you anything. It's like reading any comic book adaptation of an already established work. You'd have to super, super duper love it to want to read it. And apparently, I just don't. I just don't. Dark Knight Returns, The Last Crusade. So, this is the story all about how Jason Todd's life got flipped upside down. And how it got flipped upside down? Well, the Joker killed him. And for those of you that don't know, that usually is what happens to Jason Todd. He meets a crowbar. So, what is the problem with Dark Knight: The Last Crusade? Well, it is the story of set in Frank Miller's Dark Knight universe, which is fine. Frank Miller's hit and miss as he gets older, or at least as time goes on, he has more misses than hits. And someone said like we give him a lot more leeway than he probably deserves, but he's usually pretty solid outside of Dark Knight Strikes Back and All Star Batman and Robin. He knows how to sometimes write a good Batman story since Dark Knight Returns. But the Dark Knight: The Last Crusade is just sort of forgettable. I mean, it's the story of how Jason Todd died. So again, we know what's going to happen. We know what will befall this character. The problem is this story is just so short, and it's not even really told from Jason's perspective. It's told from Batman's perspective, which should work. But what's more interesting is really the fact that Batman is noticing he's getting slower. He's getting a bit weaker. Like the idea that he could conceivably beat Killer Croc is like, yeah, I don't think I can do this. But why does that matter? Him also noticing Jason slightly going to, like he's a bit darker than the other ones. Like I think Dick Grayson's also mentioned in this. I'm like, well, where is Dick? Like where? It's not uncommon for Jason to be the first Robin and him be killed off. That's currently what's going on in Batman: Curse of the White Knight. Jason Todd was the first Robin. So why not? And what's happening in The Last Crusade is, well, we don't even see Jason die. We just know what'll happen. Like, Joker's barely in The Last Crusade. So we just know, oh, it ends with him getting caught. Okay. Why? We don't even see Batman arrive to save Jason, well, to find Jason dead. So, yeah, it was ultimately a waste of time. It was also like $7 to read. Like, ugh, hated it, hated it. Green Lantern, New Guardians. So when I started reading comics, like one of the first superhero comics I read was actually Blackest Night. And Blackest Night, I think, is a really good entry point for readers because there's not a lot of continuity going in, except that Batman's dead. Like Bruce is dead, dead, and zombie lanterns is, I think, really cool. Like zombies being brought back to life as Black Lanterns. That's cool. That's great. So then I go to what happens afterwards, which leads to stuff like um, War of the Green Lantern Corps, and that was a fun story. Then Hal Jordan getting fired, which led to like we got three more. We got a total of three Green Lantern books at the time, four if you count Red Lanterns. So there was Green Lantern, Green Lantern Corps, and Green Lantern New Guardians. Green Lantern New Guardians was, I think, the worst one of the story. So Green Lantern New Guardians was, well, the Green Lantern book suffered a lot under the New 52 because it never rebooted. Granted, very few things rebooted in New 52, but the Green Lantern book never rebooted. But every other story concerning the Green Lantern Corps sort of implied they did reboot. But whatever. The Green Lantern New Guardians is about Kyle Rayner and one member of every other Green Lantern, of every other Lantern Corps. So you had a Star Sapphire, you had a Violet Lantern, you had a Sinestro Corps member, you had a Red Lantern member, you had a Blue Lantern. It was like, okay, that's cool. I get it. New Guardians. I like that. And that idea is kind of shot to hell later on when, yeah, the main plot of the Green Lantern books, written by Jeff Johns, who was pretty much bookending, like ending his Green Lantern run, took over. So Kyle has to match the emotional spectrum so he can control the white lantern power, which is later turned out to be the life equation. And this should all sound cool, but the problem is the characters that I think made Green Lantern New Guardians great, which was different members of different corps working together, they're gone. They're just gone. They eventually leave and do other stuff. Like, no, that was cool. Like Kyle and Arkilla are cool. Yeah. Like, why would you do that? No. Why is he dating Carol Ferris? Why? Why would you do that? And because there are three different Green Lantern books, And there were stories that required you to read each Green Lantern book to get the full grasp of it, especially when Sinestro came out. Cullen Bunn Sinestro is, I think, grossly underappreciated. But because of that, you just felt burned out when you didn't like it. It's like, oh, well, okay, I don't like the direction we're going with Colorado, so I have to then pick it up to find out what's going on in the other Green Lantern book. And it's like, ugh, why? Why? So it just became one big thing. A book should never feel like mandatory reading. It never should. You should want to read this because you feel it's mandatory to you, not to really appreciate a story. And there can be some leeway with that. Like, hey, you just have to sort of read this to get a general understanding, but you don't need to. That's sort of it. Um, if I recall, like when Jeff Johns wrote, when he was writing before Watchmen, and still writing before Watchmen, if I'm not mistaken, you didn't really have to read Watchmen or even watch it to appreciate it. Like you don't really have to read Watchmen, but if you want to have a good understanding, like you might want to read Watchmen. So but you didn't need to. And yeah, if you don't like Kyle Rayner, this will not endear you to him. And yeah, yeah, just never again, never again. Justice League of America. So Justice League of America is sort of, I think, one of the things I totally dislike about comic books, which is books that exist to make you read other books. And you wonder, well, like Rebirth, when they did one of their first times, which is Night of the Monster Men, you didn't have to read Nightwing. You didn't have to. And granted, Nightwing's issue was part of that story, but because Nightwing was good, because Batman was good, because Detective Comics, but all three of those books were good, it was sort of like rewarding you for reading it already. That's what it should do. You should feel rewarded for having, read that other book. You should feel like you have to. And with Justice League of America, which this one, it's a New 52 book, it takes place, well, all books are New 52 books, we're still under that banner, um, is a story that takes place after, well, let's sum it up as best as possible. Wonder Woman makes out with Superman, fires Steve Trevor from his liaison job to the Justice League. This is when most of the world knows that Steve Trevor confessed his feelings to Wonder Woman. So the world thinks Steve Trevor's been super dumped for Superman. And Amanda Wall's like, so, I heard you got dumped. Like, you didn't get dumped, but we all know you got dumped. So you're a joke now. How would you like to work for me now? Again. And we want to assemble a team designed to fight the Justice League. Well, wasn't that Suicide Squad? No, I need something publicly acceptable to the people. Look, if they already know that I put bombs, that I'm releasing super criminals and putting bombs in their head and forcing them to do dangerous jobs, it'll just be a media nightmare. But if I comprise a team of superheroes loyal to the U.S. first that we can control, it'll work better. So this is a team now of Steve Trevor, of Catwoman, because why not? Hawkman, Vibe. Still don't know who Vibe was. He had a book out for I want to say maybe 12 issues, maybe a 12-issue book. Katana was actually one of the first books I read, and it was hit and miss, kind of forgettable. I might have to pick that up later. Simon Baz, Green Lantern, when no one knew what he was supposed to be doing, and the only professional in the room, Martian Manhunter, along with Stargirl, because JSA continuity didn't happen yet. It was weird. So this team looks fun, looks great, and its sole purpose is to be in Trinity War. I'm not exaggerating because after Trinity War, this team is already disbanded. This team serves no purpose, and it's sad because once Trinity War happens, you sort of see exactly why this book exists. It's designed because Trinity War is about three Justice Leagues going at it. Justice League of America, Justice League Dark, and then that leads to Trinity War, which is a somewhat interesting story. I might have to really sit down and read Trinity War again to sort of understand how I feel about it. But because Justice League of America exists to just tell that story and then it goes nowhere, it's a waste of time. And they don't even play that big a role in Trinity War for the most part. We could have legitimately just stretched out the main Trinity War book a couple more issues. Okay, well, this, and this. Every other issue would juggle between a different league, and we go from there. Instead, no, you have to. You'll find yourself getting 3 books, and DC is sort of gone up dancing. We're probably not going to do that again make readers have to buy 3 books to get one story. No, didn't work out so well. Thank you, Dan. I'm glad you learned that. I'm glad. Wish I'd learned that earlier. So yeah, just League of America is just forgettable. There's no real character moment to it that really just matters at all. Justice League United. So Justice League United is a bit different than Justice League of America. Justice League of United was originally pitched as the Justice League of Canada, eh? And that would sound fun. I'm like, so we got Canadian superheroes now? I didn't know Canada had superheroes. I thought they just, like rented it from us, but whatever, whatever. It was actually a pretty interesting first couple of issues. We had Adam Strange, we had his girlfriend slash fiance, Stargirl, Green Arrow, Supergirl, Martian Manhunter. I'm liking this team. And we got this new, not Native American, I'm not sure what the actual term is. I think officially it's called First Nations people. Um, uh, Canadian Indian? Like, don't blast me for this. I'm legit trying. Um, she ties her powers to the quote unquote native mythology of Canada, um, First Nations people of Canada, and I thought, okay, that's cool, that's great. Where can this book go wrong? And then it went wrong. So this really cool team is then just sort of removed because now we have different stories with different Justice League members just coming in. I'm like, why? They're not even just Justice League members. Like, I want to put Poison Ivy and Jason Blood in there. I'm like, why? Well, because it needs them. Like, why? Why is Swamp Thing in this book? Why is Batgirl in this book? Why do you actually need them in this book? Well, because Adam Strange is trapped in sort of like, loop. And to get out, we have to find a way to get him out. And Adam's just like, I can find the perfect team for each event. Like, well, then where's the struggle? Like, I don't have a problem with a new character coming in to help out, but you're also removing really cool characters that should be like stabilizing the brand, stabilizing the book, and you've gotten rid of them. So why? And then that book got canceled because I think it deserved to get canceled for the most part. Certain books just have to get canceled because they aren't doing what they should be doing. They aren't selling well. Actually, not selling well is kind of a good reason to get canceled. Let's be honest. Mighty Thor. So Jane Foster is going to have a hammer, and Natalie Portman's going to have a hammer because Marvel Phase 4 seems to be a total misfire. Except Doctor Strange, that one sounds fun. So my issue with Mighty Thor is more the fact that looking at everything now, it just felt like kind of pointless. So Mighty Thor was a good long run with Jason Aaron. It was just Jane Foster was Thor, and it wasn't her first story with. Wasn't her first story. Her first story was Thor, Goddess of Thunder, which I felt was much better, which had more Thor in it. Like Jane Foster as Thor, I think did a decent job. I don't think she really explored the idea of what Thor was supposed to be, but the idea that Arbor Thor had fallen so far, it was calling himself Odin's son, because he doesn't have a hammer, so it's not his name anymore. He can't. He doesn't feel like he's up to it. Doesn't feel God enough to be a hero. So Jane Foster takes up the mantle as Thor, and Thor, Goddess of Thunder, was about the mystery of who this lady Thor was, and it was hit and miss for some people. But I think Mighty Thor is where I think it missed a lot more people because it just kept going on and on and on, and we didn't know what Thor did to not be able to lift the hammer. Like Jason Aaron seemed to think that they won't wonder about Thor because they got Jane Foster. Like no, they will. They legitimately will because we know it's somebody's got to get the hammer back. We don't know why he doesn't have the hammer. We don't know why he's not worthy. And Jane Foster's story just kept going on and on and on and on. And it tries to like tie into what will eventually be War of the Realms, Malekith the Accursed, the Roxxon Corporation, the not real, not quite there Civil War on Asgard slash Asgardia. The quote unquote Game of Thrones with Lady Freya and Loki and Odin that didn't go anywhere, and Cole Borson and Heimdall. Like none of this, like everyone was there, but no one really wanted to commit to the set story. At least that's how I interpreted it. That's why I felt like a waste. Like I couldn't even read every issue of it because like I just can't do it. I just can't do it. It's like almost $4. I'm not doing this. No, no. I love myself. No. and that's what I'm sort of slightly worried about what's going to happen with Natalie Portman's Thor, which I highly doubt it will. Doctor Strange post Last Days of Magic. So, one of the characters I wanted to really get into reading when I started reading comics was Doctor Strange. I like magic. Um, he looks cool. He looks like in the comics. He always felt like he wanted to be Vincent Price, and Benedict Cumberbatch, who uh, like his movie was announced, and later he got a new book announced. So I'm like, okay, well that's fine. Let's read it. And Last Days of Magic was actually really cool. Death of Magic, whatever you want to call it. Something's wrong with magic, and there's a science cult coming to kill it. That was a cool story. Understanding that magic has a price, that there's been a way that Wong has to find a way to make it so strange doesn't exactly pay the price, was cool. I sort of liked it, as well as how they tackled how the mundane and the magical sort of interact together. I like that. The problem was after that, after the death of magic story and the slow progression of magic returning, it sort of went off the rocker. It sort of didn't quite know where it was going. Like it felt like the story was waiting for magic to return. Like Jason Aaron didn't quite know when he won. Like, well, when is magic coming back? I don't know yet. Well, I'll write a story about them waiting for magic to come back yet, and it just sort of went nowhere. Um, Especially with the story when Loki, well, was the Sorcerer Supreme. I'm like, oh, that is such a cool idea. Why aren't we doing more of that Loki and Sorcerer Supreme? Because at the time, Doom was Iron Man, and now we got Loki and the Sorcerer Supreme. I'm like, this is actually really cool. Let's do this. And then think about that. That could have been like that could have been Civil War 2. Doom versus Loki. Think about it, people. That would have been so cool. But we didn't do that. We didn't. Loki being the Sorcerer Supreme meant nothing. The art was terrible for that arc. And now Strange is sort of like flopping along with stories and ideas that they just don't seem to fully realize. I don't know. Maybe I'm not appreciating the book for what it is, but the whole time I'm like, why are we doing this? Why? Why? I'm bored now. Stop it. How did you mess up Galactus? Just don't know. With that in mind, we'll bring this video to close here. So, if you're new to the Bug Thing, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. Is there a book, movie, TV show that you regret watching, reading, or whatever? Not that you hate, but like looking back on, just sort of like meant nothing. Like it was just a waste of your time, which I always feel is worse than something bad. Like, a glorious train wreck is a thing. So I will catch you all later. This is Debug, Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching, and as always, may your fandom serve you well.